House sitting for my cousin Mia was a dream come true. Her house on the Pacific coast in Santa Barbara was a stunning, sprawling estate with ocean views and luxurious amenities. Mia was a famous actress, often away on shoots, and she trusted me to take care of her home while she was gone. It was supposed to be a peaceful, relaxing weekend. It turned out to be anything but. The first night was idyllic. I settled in, enjoyed the sunset from the terrace, and fell asleep listening to the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. But on the second night, things took a terrifying turn. I was lounging in the living room, reading a book, when I received the first message. It was from an unknown number. "Enjoying the view?" I frowned, thinking it was a prank. I texted back, "Who is this?" No response. I shrugged it off and went back to my book. A few minutes later, another message buzzed in. "Nice book, but you should probably close the curtains." A chill ran down my spine. I glanced at the large bay windows. The curtains were open, revealing the dark ocean and starlit sky beyond them. Someone was watching me. My heart raced as I typed, "Seriously, who is this? This isn't funny." The reply came almost immediately. "You look scared. Maybe you should be." Panic set in. I jumped up and closed the curtains, my hands shaking. The phone buzzed again. "Too late. I can see you." I looked around the room, searching for cameras, anything that might explain how they could see me. Nothing. My breath came in short gasps as I typed, "Leave me alone." Silence. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen. The footsteps grew closer, crunching on the gravel of the flower beds, then stepping onto the pathway, and finally onto the wooden porch. I turned off the lights and hid behind the couch, my phone clutched in my hand. A new message appeared on the screen. "Hide all you want. I'm coming in." I stifled a scream as I heard the front door splintering under the force of a kick. The intruder's footsteps echoed through the hall, methodical and deliberate. They knew I was there, and they were in no hurry. One of them started whistling a haunting, tuneless melody that sent chills down my spine. The whistling was unrelenting, a constant reminder that they were closing in. I held my breath, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The footsteps moved through the house, searching room by room. I could hear drawers being opened, furniture being moved. They were getting closer. Then the phone rang. It was the landline. The sound of the high-pitched ring deafening in the silence. The room was motionless as the phone continued to ring. I couldn't move towards it without someone seeing me, so all I could do was hold my breath and listen. The phone stopped ringing. A few seconds later, it rang again. This time, I had to fight every impulse I had to run for the phone, but I didn't dare move. The ringing finally stopped, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The intruders resumed their search, more frantic now. The sound of objects being smashed and furniture being overturned filled the house. They were ransacking the place, and it wouldn't be long before they found me. I could hear their voices now, low and menacing, filled with taunts and dark humor. "I know you're here," one of them called out, his voice dripping with malice. "Why don't you come out and play?" I curled up tighter behind the couch, praying they wouldn't find me. But my prayers went unanswered. A hand grabbed my ankle and yanked me out of my hiding spot. I screamed and kicked, but they were too strong. They dragged me across the floor, their faces obscured by masks. "Tie her up," one of them growled, pulling out a length of rope. I struggled, but it was no use. They were too strong. They forced me onto my stomach and started binding my wrists together. The rope bit into my skin, and I could feel the tears streaming down my face. The whistling resumed, closer and more unnerving than ever. They dragged me into the center of the living room, tossing me down like a discarded toy. One of them loomed over me, his masked face mere inches from mine. "Why are you doing this?" I managed to choke out, my voice trembling. "Does it matter?" he replied coldly. Just as they were about to gag me, the landline phone rang again. The sound was sharp and piercing in the tense silence. The intruders paused, exchanging glances. The whistling stopped, and one of them walked over to the phone, ripping it from the wall in a fit of frustration. "What now?" another hissed, clearly unnerved by the persistent ringing. Suddenly, the front door burst open. A tall man in black tactical gear stormed in, his movements swift and precise. It was Thomas, the head of security, someone I'd only met once in passing. He moved with deadly efficiency, taking down the attackers one by one. They didn't stand a chance. Within moments, he had subdued them all, securing them with zip ties. "Are you okay?" he asked, helping me to my feet. I nodded, still in shock. "How did you know?" "A silent alarm was tripped. The phone calls were part of the disarm procedure. When you didn't answer, I knew something was wrong," he explained. "You're safe now." The police arrived shortly after, taking the intruders into custody. It turned out they had been stalking my cousin for months, planning to kidnap her for ransom. They hadn't expected her to be away and me to be there instead. I stayed with my cousin for the rest of the week, too afraid to be alone. The beautiful house by the ocean now felt tainted by the terror I had experienced. I knew I would never forget those menacing messages and the fear of being hunted within those walls. Thomas, the head of security, became a hero in my eyes, his timely intervention saving me from a fate I dared not imagine. But even with the attackers behind bars, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching, waiting for another opportunity to strike. When my parents asked me to house sit for the weekend, I jumped at the chance. Their place was a sprawling old house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by forest and far enough from the neighbors that the nights were pitch black and eerily silent. It sounded like the perfect getaway from my noisy dorm. The first night was uneventful. I lounged around, watched TV, and fell asleep early. But on the second night, things took a terrifying turn. It started with a noise, a loud and repetitive thumping sound coming from somewhere in the house. I woke with a start, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed my phone and checked the time, 2:15 a.m. The house was dark and silent. But then I heard it again, banging somewhere. I got out of bed and cautiously made my way through the hallway, flipping on lights as I went. The banging would pause for a moment, then continue in a different area of the house. But each room I entered was empty and untouched. As I moved down the hall towards the staircase, the noise got louder. It was coming from downstairs. I crept down the staircase, my footsteps barely making a sound on the old wooden steps. As I reached the bottom, I saw the front door rattle and shake on its frame. Then more loud banging at the door. My stomach dropped. I walked quietly to the door and tried to turn the knob, but it wouldn't budge. The door had been nailed shut from the outside. Panic surged through me. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but there was no signal. The house, surrounded by dense forest, had always been a dead zone for cell reception. I rushed to the back door, hoping for a way out, but it was the same, nailed shut from the outside. In a frenzy, I ran to the windows. To my horror, I discovered that every window on the ground floor had been nailed shut. Long, rusty nails were hammered into the frames, sealing them completely. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone had trapped me inside. I raced back upstairs, hoping to find an open window or some way to escape. But every room I checked was the same. The sounds of nails being driven into the wood echoed throughout the house, each one a hammer blow to my growing sense of dread. The thumping, the scraping, the heavy, deliberate steps of someone methodically sealing me in, it was all coming from outside. I pounded on the walls, screamed for help, but there was no one to hear me. The house was an island, isolated and cut off from the world. The noises continued, relentless and unyielding. The hammering grew louder, more urgent, as if they knew I was awake and panicking. Desperation clawed at me. I ran to the living room and found the large picture window overlooking the front yard. Through the glass, I saw a figure standing in the shadows, watching me. The person wore a dark hoodie, the hood pulled low over their face, hiding their features. They stood motionless, their eyes locked on mine. I grabbed a chair and hurled it at the window, but it bounced off the reinforced glass. The figure outside didn't flinch, their gaze unyielding. I felt like a trapped animal. My every move watched and anticipated. The realization that there was no escape sank in. I retreated to the center of the house, away from the windows and doors. I could still hear the hammering, the methodical sealing of my fate. The air grew heavy and oppressive, each breath a struggle. Then I smelled it. Smoke. I rushed to the kitchen and saw flames climbing up the walls, the fire spreading rapidly. The heat was intense, and the smoke stung my eyes and throat. I rushed to the back door and pounded on it, screaming for help. But I knew it was futile. The house was a fortress, and I was its prisoner. The fire spread quickly, consuming everything in its path. The heat was unbearable, and the smoke thickened, making it hard to see or breathe. I retreated to the living room, the only place not yet engulfed in flames. The figure outside the window was still there, watching with cold detachment as the fire raged around me. I could feel the heat searing my skin, the smoke choking the life out of me. My vision blurred, and I fell to my knees, gasping for air. As the flames closed in, I saw the figure step closer to the window, their face still hidden in shadow. With my last ounce of strength, I reached out toward the window, my fingers brushing the glass. The figure leaned in, and for a brief moment our eyes met. There was no emotion in their gaze, no remorse or satisfaction, just emptiness. Darkness began to close in, the edges of my vision going black. I felt consciousness slipping away, the smoke too thick to take in another breath. Just before I lost consciousness, I heard the faint sound of sirens in the distance. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, my body wrapped in bandages. The pain was excruciating, but I was alive. A nurse told me a neighbor had seen the fire and called 911, busting down the door and pulling me from the burning house just in time. It took a year of painful recovery, the scars on my body a permanent reminder of that night. Whoever had terrorized me and set the fire had vanished without a trace, leaving only shadows and unanswered questions behind. Every night I relive the terror, the figure in the dark watching me as the flames closed in. The house of shadows and fire still haunts my dreams, a nightmare I can never escape. I had always liked house sitting. It was a break from my tiny apartment in Portland. The house I was in now was big, with tall windows and an old oak tree right outside. My client was away for a month, and I was to stay the entire time. It seemed easy enough. It was Friday night. I made myself a cup of tea and settled on the couch with a book. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the old wood. I enjoyed the peace. Sometime after midnight, I heard a noise. It was a soft thud, like something had fallen. I ignored it at first, thinking it was just the house settling, but then I heard it again. This time, it was louder. I put my book down and got up, with my heart pounding. I walked to the kitchen where the noise seemed to come from. The room was dark, the only light coming from the moon outside. Suddenly, there was a crash. The back door shook. Someone was trying to break in. I called out, "Hello?" my voice trembling. There was no answer, just the sound of someone fumbling with the door handle. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking. The operator picked up. 911, what's your emergency? Someone is trying to break into the house, I whispered. Stay calm, ma'am. Help is on the way. I hung up and looked around for something to defend myself with. I found a heavy frying pan and gripped it tightly. My heart was racing. The sounds stopped. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Then a loud bang from the front door. He was trying another way in. I moved to the living room, keeping my back against the wall, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The noises continued, a thud from the front window, a bang on the side of the house, a horrific scraping noise from the back door. Each sound was closer, louder, more terrifying. He was toying with me, making sure I knew he was there, making sure I was scared. Then he suddenly said, "Are you scared?" His voice from outside, low and menacing, he said, "You should be." I tried to stay calm, but my hands were shaking. I moved through the living room, keeping my back against the wall. That's all I knew how to do. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he would hear it. Suddenly, the lights went out. The house was plunged into darkness. I stifled a scream. I could hear him moving outside the house, slow and deliberate. He was enjoying this.
Come out, wherever you are."
He taunted me. His voice was closer now, almost right outside the window. I hid behind the couch, trying to control my breathing. Tears streamed down my face. I felt like a trapped animal. Minutes passed, each one an eternity. The noises grew louder, closer. He was at the back door again, knocking things over, slamming something against the door.
"Are you scared?"
He called out again.
"I know you are."
I couldn't take it anymore. The fear was overwhelming. I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Then suddenly, everything went quiet. No more noises. No more taunts. Just silence. I stayed hidden, too scared to move. The minutes stretched on, each one a lifetime. Then the back door burst open. The man in the black hoodie stepped inside. He didn't see me at first. I tried to stay calm, but my hands were shaking. I continued moving through the living room, as quietly as I could. I bumped a lamp. Our eyes met. He stepped forward. "Get out," I shouted, raising the frying pan. He paused, then lunged at me. I swung the pan as hard as I could. It hit his arm and he stumbled back, cursing. I took the chance to run. I sprinted out of the kitchen and up the stairs. My legs felt like jelly. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. I reached the bedroom and slammed the door shut. I locked it and pressed my back against it, trying to catch my breath. There was silence. Then a loud bang. He was trying to break down the door. I could hear sirens in the distance. Finally, help was coming. I just had to hold on a little longer. The door cracked. I held the frying pan up, ready to swing. Then the door burst open and the man was there. But before he could reach me, there were shouts from downstairs. The man turned and bolted. I heard him running down the hall into another bedroom, followed by the sound of a struggle. I stayed in the room, too scared to move. After what felt like forever, a police officer knocked on the door. "It's safe now," he said. I opened the doors, my hands still shaking. The officer smiled at me. "You're safe now," he repeated. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I had never been so scared in my life. That night I couldn't sleep. Every noise made me jump. I kept repeating to myself, "At least I'm safe. At least I'm safe." That was all that mattered.